It's another night in hell, another child won't live to tell. Can you imagine what it's like to starve to death? And as we set free and well, another soldier has to yell, tell my wife and children I love them in his last breath. Come on now, amen, amen, amen.
Hello, this is Awaken to Truth podcast, and I am your host, Michael Smith. Good to be coming to you today. I believe we have an exciting and an informative episode that you are going to want to listen to, something that's going to maybe help you make sense of some things, or at least give you some information that maybe you did not know prior to listening to this. But today we're going to look at the subject, or the title of this episode is going to be, Could 2021 Lead to 1984? And in doing that, of course, I am making the comparison, or I am alluding back to the George Orwell classic that has seen quite a renewal of interest in recent years. The dystopian novel 1984, where we get many of these terms of Big Brother, and most people today are aware of this book. They at least have some kind of pop culture type of reference or understanding to what this book is. So we're going to take a look at Orwell some today and compare it to some of the things that we see taking place. And we're going to draw some conclusions. Can 2021 lead to 1984? If you would, please subscribe on whatever platform you may be listening from. And if you would also leave me a review, I would appreciate that very much. We've had a few new reviews come in on Apple, and so thank you guys for taking the time to leave those reviews. Those of you that have, that's very helpful, and I appreciate it very much. So let's get into the episode today. Could 2021 lead to 1984? Well, with all the things that we have seen here in the last year or so, and it's not even just the things that we have seen. It is the speed that things have taken place. It is the absolute light speed of change that has just taken place at a rate that I think has taken many people by surprise. I guess there's some people that they're actually not paying attention to it, which is unbelievable to me. But I think many people are kind of looking at the speed and the pace that things have changed, and it's beginning to cause some concern. And they're beginning to wonder what is going on, and where is this headed, and is it ever going to end? And so I was watching CNN last night, and some of you may wonder, or you may ask, why in the world would you ever watch CNN? And I don't do it a lot, but I do periodically check in and watch CNN because I'm interested in what propaganda is being put out there. I'm interested in what spin is, being spun out there for everybody to hear. I can't really relate to someone that actually watches CNN and thinks that they're getting news or thinks that they're getting something of great value. I don't watch it for that purpose. For that matter, you can throw almost any of them in the equation. But I don't watch it for that purpose. I watch it to see what are they saying so that I can know what kind of spin and what kind of propaganda is being thrown out there. So I'm watching last night, and they are really pushing this new strain of coronavirus. Evidently, it's here now. I guess there's the Brazilian strain and then some other strain as well. So I think there's two new ones that they're talking about. And they're both here now, and they're extremely contagious. They haven't really said whether they're deadly or not, but they're extremely contagious. And the thing that they were pushing is, now that this is here, we have to be much more careful again. We have to really limit our time and our exposure out there in society. Stay in your house as much as possible. Stay home. This is very, very contagious. They use the example, if you went to the grocery store before and you thought it was relatively safe, now you know that it's actually not. and that this is twice, maybe 3 times as contagious as it was before. So spend as little time out as you possibly can. Get the groceries. Get back to your house as soon as possible. And here was the other suggestion that they gave. When you're out, in order to combat these new strains of coronavirus, make sure not to wear just one mask, but put a second mask on. And so I listened to that and I was like, wow. In fact, a good friend of mine who is a medical doctor, he had ironically sent me, I didn't get it till about an hour or two later, but he had sent me around the same time I'm listening to this article from Huffington Post, like basically saying, now you have to wear 2 masks. Okay. Now, like I've tried to be somewhat subjective about the mask thing up to this point. Well, maybe not really, not super subjective. I mean, I've definitely shared my opinion that I don't love the masking. I think it should be a choice. If you want a mask, mask. If you don't, don't. I don't like where it's forced, and there's like 30 plus states that it's forced in. And so anyhow, but I've tried to be somewhat subjective, like, well, maybe it could work because I understand the spirit of the rule, okay? The spirit of the rule is, well, if we're jammed in close together and a bunch of us are sneezing and coughing, that while these masks, they're not going to keep you from getting coronavirus, okay? That's clear. That's obvious at this point because most people that get coronavirus are wearing masks. But I get the spirit of the rule that if we're all jammed in together or whatever, putting a mask on, like it limits how many of the droplets get out there. Like they're still going to get out there because these are surgical masks. Some people are not even wearing surgical masks. They're wearing socks on their face, whatever. But these are not things that are going to like completely entrap the droplets. But I get the idea behind it, all right? So that's why I try to be somewhat open and not completely negative about it, because I understand that. But that's the spirit behind it, okay? So you can take this back to biblical things. Paul said that the letter kills, but the spirit gives life. So the spirit behind it is if we're all jammed together, it might make some sense to put a mask on just so that we can limit the droplets that are out there. Okay, I can get that, all right? I still don't know why like masking everywhere at all times is such an obsession right now. But when I'm standing in the grocery store and it's, say, 9 o'clock at night, and this has been a real scenario, and there's 10 other people, maybe 20 other people at most, in a 60, 70,000 square foot grocery store, I don't need to wear a mask walking down the aisle by myself. And so you've got the spirit of the rule and the practicality of the rule. I'll give you another example. Here in the state of Ohio, they have resumed high school wrestling. The wrestlers are not allowed to shake hands before the match. Why? This is COVID-19 protocol. But they're about to grab each other, roll around on the ground, sweat all over each other, breathe into each other's mouths potentially, but they can't shake hands before. It's insane. So when you create laws upon laws upon laws and rules upon rules upon rules, the spirit of the law and the spirit of the rule begins to go out the window, and you begin to go down this path of complete irrationality. Logic is no longer anything that is considered. It's just follow the rule. And that can be dangerous, I believe, because it can lead people to becoming so conditioned to do nothing but just exactly what they're told that we stop thinking for ourselves. And really, if you think about it, this is a different subject. And I'm going to get into the 1984 stuff here in just a minute. This is the last thing I'll say. But if you think about it, we are conditioned from the time we're little to do exactly what we're told. Now, when I say little, like once we enter school, like 6, and now it's even preschool because we can't even stay at home and be free until we're 6 anymore. Now it's essential that we get into preschool and begin to, get into this structure when we're 4. And look, I'm not against structure. I'm not against, getting ahead of the game or whatever. But what I'm saying is that from the time we're very young, we are molded to sit down, be quiet, listen, do what we're told, get in a straight line, don't get out of line, stay right there how you're supposed to, don't talk, just sit, just do as you're told. We are trained to be good little automatons, to be as obedient as we possibly can, and to just listen and do what we're told. And I think that's why school growing up was so miserable for me. And I don't say that like being hyperbolic. It really was absolutely miserable for me. It was one of the most miserable experiences. Like it's, some people would want to go back and relive high school or junior high or not me, none of it. It was a miserable experience. I felt literally like I was in prison every day because I didn't want to just sit there and listen and be quiet and do what it absolutely was just some days I felt like it was one of the worst things that I could be in. Now it really wasn't, but that's how I felt as a kid. But we're trained to do what we're told, from a very young age. And so my question to my friend last night that was the medical doctor about these two, now you need to put 2 masks on. Put 2 on. Are they trying to just, are they trying to see like how stupid we are? Or do they actually think this is scientific? Have there really been scientific, peer-reviewed, solid studies that have been done that said now that a second strain is out, you put a second mask on your face, and that's what's going to prevent you from getting it? There's no way that's been done because these strains just got here. Science isn't done in a week. Science isn't done in 24 hours. Now, I'm not like an expert on science. Some of you listening may know far more about science than I do, but I do know scientific method. That scientific method means that there is a process of figuring out the science. And so there's no way that they've gone through this process of figuring out the science that a second mask is somehow going to be the answer to these new strains of coronavirus. So why are they doing it? Why are they saying it? Is it like just supposed to make us feel good? Is it supposed to be something that psychologically gives us comfort? Is it something, like I said, just to see how stupid are we? Like, well, they've put 1 mask on their face all this time, and we continue to report to them every day how it's not stopping coronavirus, but yet it's also working at the same time. So now let's put a second mask on their face. Many people are, I am being a little bit hyperbolic now, okay? These are theories, just ideas. This could be completely inaccurate. I'm just thinking things through and seeing like, where could this be going? Well, there are some dissenters to the inoculation. They don't want the vaccine. We need more conditioning. Let's see if they'll put 2 masks on their face. If they'll put 2 masks on their face in a widespread level, then maybe they will consent and break down and take the vaccine. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that's the case or not. I don't know. There is certainly something out there that is bothering some of our politicians, and it was on CNN last night. They were very bothered about the idiots that would not take the vaccine. Anderson Cooper said, "It's hard for me to believe. It's difficult for me to..." Well, no, it's not. It's actually not. That 50% of America doesn't want to take the vaccine. So what, Anderson? So what if 50% of America doesn't want to take the vaccine? A lot of America doesn't trust the government, and we don't trust big pharma, okay? That's why they don't want to take the vaccine. Look, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. My kids all got vaccinated. I got vaccinated when I was a kid, but I don't just go around shooting extra vaccines in me like for no real reason, okay? Coronavirus, I think my chances are really high on it. In fact, I'm pretty sure I already had it because I went through a week where I had some minor aches, chills, totally lost my taste and lost my smell. And that's a pretty telltale sign of coronavirus. So I think I actually already had it. I'll take my chances. I'll take my vitamin D, take my zinc, try to exercise and be as healthy as I can. I don't really want the inoculation. But there is a politician, a congressman from here in Ohio, Republican, that said he is all for sending out $1,400 checks to everyone. Not $2,000 checks like they're talking about, but he's all for sending out $1,400 checks to everyone as long as they're inoculated. If they're not inoculated, $0 for you. That's the kind of thing that starts to concern people. If the vaccine works and is it effective, it needs to speak for itself. Give it some time. If it truly works and it's truly effective, come April, I bet that 50% number will be less. More people will be open to taking it. But many people, rightly so, are not just jumping in line to take a vaccine that was produced very, very quickly. And who really knows how well it's going to work? Because they've never come up with an effective vaccine for any other coronaviruses before. So give it some time. It should be self-evident. It shouldn't have to be forced. People shouldn't have to be shamed because they have questions about this vaccine. If it works, by and large, most people will take it if it works and if it's proved to be safe. But these are the kind of things that cause people to have questions. And they cause people to begin to look at 1984 and look at the totalitarianism that George Orwell was fearful of. Now, there's authoritarianism and then there's totalitarianism. Authoritarianism is a strict obedience at the expense of freedom. And so that's we're seeing authoritarianism now, that they are asking for strict obedience at the expense of personal freedom. Totalitarianism is the next, it's the next chain in the link. Now, some people would say, how could you say it's authoritarian to wear a mask? This is for the greater good. This is for public health. Okay, that's fine. If you want to make that argument, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not even necessarily disagreeing with it. But you've got to shut down your business and go bankrupt for the greater good? That is authoritarianism. And you see it taking place in these United States of America. You see it taking place in other countries around the world as well. And so totalitarianism is a complete subservience. And so that's what Orwell was fearful of as he writes 1984, this fear of totalitarianism, of mass surveillance, which we have, of media propaganda, which we have, of perpetual war, which kind of we have. So you see that there's a lot of merit as to why people would be going back and looking into George Orwell's 1984. Now, thankfully, it has not come to pass. We have a lot greater freedom still in the western part of the world than they had in 1984. And Orwell had a particular fear of these things taking place, because of big, collectivist type movements. One of those collectivist movements was nationalism. And nationalism has gotten a very bad name under the era of Trump. And let me say right off, nationalism taken to extremes can be very negative, okay? But nationalism in mild form is actually very much innate in human nature. Because many of our founding fathers saw a certain mild sense of nationalism as being a positive thing. And this is how they viewed it. I like other countries. I don't wish any bad on other countries, but I like my country better. That's how the founding fathers, in a very simplistic way, that's how they saw nationalism being a positive thing. Take it down to the very micro level of your household. Think of your neighbors on every side of your house and down your street. I like my neighbors. I don't wish any harm on my neighbors. I'd even help my neighbors if they needed my help, but I like my family more. That is what they viewed nationalism as. Now, nationalism at promoting a nation's culture, identity, and whatever at the expense of everyone else and pushing it down everyone else's throat. Yes, that's not good, but that's not what Trump was doing. Trump's form of nationalism was very, very mild. Trump's form of nationalism was just that America's priorities and interests have to be above this collective global conglomerate that we have found ourselves into. His wasn't that we're the separatists and that we push America on everyone else. In fact, he was the opposite of that. He wanted to take America somewhat out of the role of being the police state where we police all around the world. He wanted to bring troops home. He didn't want to start any more wars. He was the total opposite of the Bush doctrine where we go and invade nations and become nation builders. That's nationalism at its worst. But, while the media did deride Bush, they didn't call it nationalism. But for Trump, they didn't just call it nationalism, they called it white nationalism. But anyhow, so 1984, the reason that type of world was able to come about is basically through collectivism and collectivism being pushed, where it's all about this collective whole. The individual begins to lose liberty because the individual is not important. It's the collective whole that is important. You're beginning to see that take place. Now, maybe in infantile form, maybe in infantile stages, but that idea of collectivism is very much running through the veins of our society right now. And the collectivism that we're seeing is being pushed through radical egalitarianism. And the egalitarian is that everything is equal. Everything is completely equal. Now, I said radical equalism, radical equality, because there is a constitutional equality. The Constitution says all men are created equal. Women, you too. They are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So these rights are given to every person by who? The Creator. This equality was not a collectivist statement. It was an individualist statement that we are all equal and have been given certain rights by our Creator. Of those rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This equality was a theological statement. It was not an economic statement. That's something Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would not understand. That's something Bernie Sanders would not understand. That's something that many misguided millennials, which I am one, would not understand. I'm not misguided, I don't think, but I am a millennial. I'm the oldest of the millennials, actually. I just turned 39. If you look it up, millennials started in 1982. I'm barely one, but I was born January 1982. But many of the younger millennials, they have this misguided notion of equality, of this radical equality that's government forced. The founders were not making governmental statements. They were making a theological statement. Now, again, we don't have to relive history here. We know that that statement was not lived out to the way it should have been, okay? We know that it was an imperfect statement because there was hypocrisy involved in it as slavery was allowed, so on and so forth. But that was amended. That was fixed. And it's still, even after it was fixed, it took about 100 years for it to take its next significant step. Okay? So I'm not saying that this idea has been perpetuated perfectly by the United States. But I'm saying that we have tried, and through the years we have tried to amend our mistakes. But what the radical left is doing right now is they are pointing out the mistakes to try and overcorrect and push us towards a totalitarian type of equality that is enforced and is implemented with the government's heavy hand of control, whether you as the individual want it or not. And that's what Orwell was fearful of. Now, ironically, Orwell was a brilliant man, I believe. He was a great philosopher, clearly a good writer, had a great imagination, but strangely, Orwell was a socialist. And so it's odd in today's world to think that a socialist, because of how many of the socialists are viewing things today and what the agendas that they're promoting, it's odd today to think that a socialist would have had such concern of totalitarian control. But what he felt was that the possibility for the West is that we would not move towards what he called, and what Bernie Sanders calls himself, a democratic socialism, but we would move towards an authoritarian socialism. And that was the basis for his book, 1984. So while he was a brilliant philosopher and while he was, his book has some wonderful ideas and some fantastic insight, there's a couple of things Orwell was not. He was a bad economist and he was a poor theologian because he thought that there needed to be governmental restriction on the economy in the form of what he called democratic socialism. But what he did not understand is that economic freedom is essential to basic freedom. If the government takes economic freedom, social freedom and personal freedom will be next. You say, well, I don't know how you can say that, because I can make theological assumptions. What does the Bible say? It says that the love of money is the root of all evil. Now, it didn't say money was the root of all evil. It said the love of money was the root of all evil. And with that being the case, do we really need to entrust the government with all the production, mechanism, and generation of wealth? Is that really something that we want to do? We want to hand over that power knowing that the love of money is the root of all evil? That's not a good idea. Economic freedom is essential to basic freedom. Without it, authoritarianism or totalitarianism is inevitable. And that's why I believe they're coming after economic freedom now, because they are trying to move towards a more authoritarian type of government. You can't open your business because we said so. We said you can't. But don't worry, stay home. We'll send you a $600 check or a $1,200 check. Or I guess now maybe a $2,000 check. What is that doing? What is that doing? You know, let's go back here. If people have been out, I get that they're helping the unemployment. Okay, I get that they've beefed up the unemployment, all that. But these little checks that they're sending out to people, you know, way back in the beginning of 2020, they sent out I think $1,200 checks. And then there was a certain amount that went to children, so on and so forth. Then they sent out just recently $600 checks to everybody, and now they're talking about sending out $2,000 checks to everybody. Well, if somebody has lost everything, what are these little tiny checks spread out over, 12, almost a year time frame? What are they going to do? They're not going to do anything. But what they need to do is take the governmental restraints off of the economy and let people get back to work. And they also need to, at some point stop rewarding people for not going back to work with all of this beefed up unemployment. I get it. It's a difficult situation. I'm not, necessarily criticizing some of the things that have been done, but it's time to move on. It's time to get back to some sense of allowing people to make their own choices and choose whether they want to go back to work, whether they want to open up their business, whether they want to start a business, whatever it is. But economic freedom is essential. So that's the point I'm trying to make, is when you take away economic freedom, the other freedoms will be taken away soon thereafter. Maybe it'll take a decade. Maybe it'll take 2 decades. I doubt it, but they're going to be taken away. Now, this idea that we can just create all of this money and give it out, that's another way that they're beginning to move away from economic freedom. It's called modern monetary policy. I'm not going to go deep into it, but just keep that in the back of your mind. And watch for it, because it's going to come into play under this administration. And essentially, at the most basic form, what modern monetary policy means is that debt does not matter. Deficit spending is good. It helps people to build up their savings. Debt doesn't matter. It makes zero difference. We can get in as much debt as we want, and it makes no difference. That's why they can just keep giving away trillions of dollars, because we are operating fully and completely by modern monetary theory. Now, notice it's a theory. Why is it a theory? Because we don't really know how it's going to work out. That's why it's a theory. Because we've really only been doing it since 1971, since we went off any connection to the gold standard and went on a fiat debt-based currency that the government has no accountability to how much it can create. And so the proponents of modern monetary theory will say, yes, it is theoretically possible that there could be runaway inflation that will take place, but it's not likely. It's probably not going to happen. Don't worry about it. Well, I don't know. We don't know if runaway inflation necessarily would take place, but we know inflation is taking place. Because since they went off the gold standard in 1971, think about what has happened. Think about the way wages have not kept up with cost. Okay, look at it this way. If you had an ounce of gold in 1971 and you put it in the ground, okay, what would that gold have been worth in dollars? It would have been worth somewhere in the range of about $50 an ounce, something like that. So that ounce of gold would have been worth $50. Let me quickly, so I give you the right number. Let me go ahead and the average cost of gold in 1971 was $40.80. I just Googled it. So you could take $40 US and you could buy an ounce of gold. If you took that in 1971 and you put that ounce of gold in your basement, assuming you were around in 1971, I was not, what would that ounce of gold be worth today? Well, it would be approaching $2,000. Why? Because gold is real money. If you took that $40 and put it in your basement, what would it be worth? It would still be worth $40. So the question, or the big conundrum to this equation, is not what was it worth, what does it buy? What would $40 have bought you in 1971 versus what $40 would have bought you in 2021? It would buy you a whole lot less. A family of 5 or 6 could spend $40 at a fast food place now, easily. In 1971, you probably could have gone to a 5-star restaurant with a family of 5 or 6 for $40. But the gold, it has gone up in dollars, and its purchasing power has remained relatively constant. But the dollars have gone down in value. Why? Because modern monetary theory is based upon debt, and based upon debt, the value of the currency is always eroding because they're always creating more of it. And so that's the basis of it. And that is the basis of these big stimulus programs. And it is my concern. And so we're going to pick up next episode, and we're going to get into this a little bit deeper. At least another episode this week. I don't know if it'll exactly be the next episode. But my concern is that the first steps in this very negative direction are economic. Because if you can control the purse, and if you can control the money flow of a nation, you can, in essence, begin to completely control the nation. Now, in many ways, through the Federal Reserve System, we've kind of had an illusion of economic freedom as it is, but we're not going to get into all of that. But my point in this is that Orwell's 1984, I don't think that we have to worry about being exactly there yet, but I do think we have to worry about taking some serious totalitarian steps And I think one of those steps is trying to get people to like the idea of the government depositing money into your bank account on a regular basis. Because the next push is probably universal basic income. Where's this money going to come from? They're going to print it. Modern monetary theory. Now, should we be discouraged? Should we be depressed? No. There's a lot of things to be discouraged and to be depressed about. But we should not let ourselves go to that place of discouragement and depression. There's a fine line, like I said last episode, about understanding the issues and the situations that we're facing, but not letting them overwhelm us. We need to be informed. We don't need to constantly dwell upon it. But in this case, if we're informed, if we can see what's coming, we can begin to take some preparatory steps to see to it that we don't get wiped out by the proverbial flood, if you know what I mean. We can begin to build an ark for ourselves. That ark can be financial. That ark can be socially. That ark can be spiritually. But I believe the people of God need to begin to ask for the wisdom of God to begin to build our arks for the coming floods. Because I don't think it's going to magically get better. I do have optimism. I do believe that there can still be bright days ahead. I want to believe that, and I do believe that, but I also want to prepare for the worst in case there is not. So take this information, do with it what you will. We're going to pick up more on this subject, and we're going to look at another book, The Brave New World, which approaches totalitarianism from a very different point of view than Orwell did. And in my view, probably a more accurate way for what we're facing in the West today, how government was able to control its people. And we're going to, thresh that out a little bit. I think I'm going to have my sister on and we're going to discuss that. So take this information, do with it what you will, begin to investigate, get informed, get involved where you can, know the issues, but understand that the Lord Jesus Christ wants to lead his people through every flood, through every fire, through every situation, because David said, I once was young and now I'm old, but I have never seen the righteous forsaken or God's seed begging for bread. May God's richest blessing be on you. God bless you, and we will be back soon.